One Pittsburgh Steelers cornerback is, well, being highlighted throughout the week as a guy to watch at training camp. Can he make the roster? I don't want to say no, but I don't know if I had the same thoughts on this guy as many others do. What's going on, everybody? I'm Noah Strackbine. Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. Find us on youtube.com/all Steelers talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Today, let's talk about a veteran cornerback who many believe could be a guy for the Steelers during training camp, a name to watch. That name is James Pierre. He is gaining attention, whether it's as a potential this is the next stud on special teams, whether it's a potential this guy could actually contribute to the Pittsburgh Steelers defense and their secondary. He is gaining traction. One of my buddies, good buddies, Nick Fairbaugh, recently put out an article that sparked this conversation saying that James Pierre could be a veteran cornerback to watch at training camp. He highlights one big thing, and that one big thing is there were only 9 corners in 2022 who were targeted at least 30 times and gave up less than a 50% completion percentage. James Pierre was targeted 31 times. He only gave up 13 catches, a 41.9 completion percentage for 181 yards and 1 touchdown, while having 4 pass deflections and an interception for himself. A big year, a big jump after a year before giving up 60% of his targets for nearly 500 yards and 4 TDs. And the year before only having 1 target thrown his way, giving up a solid 1 reception. It was impressive. And I'll say this, James Pierre grew tremendously last season. What you saw from him was a much more comfortable player. You saw a veteran. You saw a guy who could adapt to the NFL speed and the change of the game and how players are going to perceive him and how he's going to perceive an offense. You saw that he understands way more about football as a 25, 26-year-old than he did a 23, 24-year-old or a 22, 23-year-old. For the first time, you realized James Pierre can develop into a player who could contribute in the NFL. And that's what you saw. You saw a guy who can contribute. But at the same time, my worries about James Pierre are this. He'll be 27 years old by the time the season starts. You're looking at a guy who has been in the league for 3 years now, going on his 4th season. You're looking at a guy who has some potential, and I think the Steelers saw that potential. But at the same time, you have to wonder how high that potential can get. Or if at one point, you're kind of just looking at a guy who peaked. And maybe that peak isn't that high, but maybe it's high enough to contribute. Maybe it's high enough to be a guy who plays special teams and makes a 53-man roster pretty easily and just is there if you need him. James Pierre can be that guy. I think that's what James Pierre is. I believe he's a guy who, at the bottom of your depth chart, you feel very comfortable with. You have no issues. And unless you have somebody else who's going to push him out, he's going to make the 53-man roster. For the Steelers, that name that could push him out is Luke Barku. And I have held strong all summer and will continue to hold strong until we get to training camp and James Pierre either starts going off or Luke Barku starts to disappear, that I think Luke Barku could be a name that Steelers fans should start to get to know, because I believe that he's got all the talent in the world to make this roster. I think that he's shown that a little bit. I think that he stepped up in bigger ways than most other corners that we've talked about during OTAs and minicamp. And while Corey Trice and Joey Porter Jr. are getting all the attention, Luke Barku has quietly become a player. He had one hell of an XFL season. The Steelers very much so enjoyed him. He's got some practice experience in the NFL, not much, and he's only 24 years old. So he's younger than James Pierre, which means that his potential still hasn't been reached, which means that there's more box to unlock. And I think that's where the discrepancy comes from. You look at James Pierre and you say, he'll be 27 years old by the season. You feel good about what you get out of him. He's a quality special teamer who developed into a good special teamer, and you got to give him that. He didn't come in here as a quality special teamer. He had to show himself and show the coaches that he could be better than Justin Lane as a gunner. Justin Lane is one heck of a special teamer. Even if he can't play defense, he is one heck of a special teamer, has always been one heck of a special teamer. He was able to beat out Justin Lane, show that he could be that guy, and then develop as a corner and become more of a veteran presence. Where James Pierre is impressive. Where James Pierre has come from is even more impressive. The fact that he is at this point in his NFL career, he's got to feel very good about, because I think that even if the Steelers let him go tomorrow, he's got a job somewhere in the NFL with a team who doesn't have a Luke Barku kind of pushing his way out. But the Steelers got to look at it like this. Joey Porter Jr., Patrick Peterson, Levi Wallace are locks. Those are 3 corners. You keep a slot, but that doesn't really count. You want at least one more on the outside, possibly 2, which brings it down to James Pierre as the running favorite. But Corey Trice and Luke Barku are also in the running. And you got to think about it like this. Chances are Corey Trice gets a roster spot. He's a 7th-round pick. I get it, and that's going to be tough, but the Steelers aren't going to let him go through waivers. They aren't going to take the risk of losing him before he can develop. Even if he isn't the guy, they will take a shot and keep him on the 53-man roster just to protect him and assure that they do not lose him like they have players in the past. Letting that guy go isn't on their mind. Corey Trice is probably going to take over a roster spot. So now you have your solid 4. Usually you only keep 4, but the Steelers might keep 5 just because Corey Trice is that extra roster spot. And if they do so, James Pierre seems like a reliable choice. I get that. I get that at some point you might want reliability. You want that comfort level. You want a guy who, yeah, okay, we know what we're getting, and if he has to go in there, he's not going to play terribly. I would totally understand that train of thought. Or you could swing for the fences a little bit, hope that a 24-year-old Luke Barku could play inside and outside, has that versatility, continues to make plays, and can be a guy that's on the rise, the next James Pierre. But instead of James Pierre's level, you hope that he has a higher ceiling, that his peak is a little bit more significant. James Pierre is like I said, time and time again, reliable guy. But if you're going to start over in the position, if you're going to take a shot on a guy who will be your last corner on the roster, and you're just looking at a guy to come in here and play special teams, and Luke Barku's got to be able to prove that he could play special teams before anything. He doesn't get a shot on defense. He doesn't get a shot on this roster. He doesn't get a shot at anything if Danny Smith doesn't love this guy by the end of the summer. But if he could do so, the Steelers could look at that situation and go, okay, look it. We know what we're getting out of James. Maybe we take a shot on a younger guy and hope that his development goes a little bit quicker and a little bit smoother, and that he kind of reaches a new level where we thought James Pierre could reach, because the Steelers 2 years ago thought James Pierre was the answer. They thought he was a starting caliber cornerback. They thought he was the guy that was going to be Akello Witherspoon before they brought in Akello Witherspoon. Tall, lengthy, very fast. That's who they hoped James Pierre was. Maybe they start over now and they lower their expectations and say, look, we have Joey Porter Jr., we have Corey Trice, we have Levi Wallace. Those guys are building blocks. We just need that other guy, that next guy for the future. James Pierre could hang out for the next 3 years and he could have 3 good seasons. And if that's the option, then, fine. You feel good about that. Or you could say Luke Barku's 24. You got him for double the amount of time that you'll have James Pierre before he starts to die off. Maybe you take a risk. Luke Barku's got to show himself and prove himself and make plays and continue to be a splash and drag himself into headlines. But right now he's got my attention. And everybody who's talking about James Pierre, I totally get the argument. And I totally see where everybody's coming from. And when my buddy Nick wrote this, I thought, yep, that makes a lot of sense. My thought's been a little different the entire time. My thought is go younger, take a chance. Maybe it works out for you. Worst case scenario, you're losing a guy that you already know how good he could be. And I don't think that's necessarily a good loss or a quality L for the Steelers. if it doesn't work out in their favor. But I think for a fourth cornerback, sometimes you take a chance.